On your screen, November 8th, 2018 through December 2nd of 2019. Before we get started though, here's our good old housekeeping slide. Here at EAN, you can study with us 3 different ways. The audio podcast that we do every week, forecasting the planets, our astral library, and of course our evolutionary astrology course. You see our phone number and website on your screen if you'd like to contact us for more information. Here are the previous Jupiter and Sagittarius cycles. Jupiter takes 12 years to go around the zodiac. It matches up fairly closely to spending approximately a year in each of the 12 signs, and therefore having a somewhat 1-year cycle around the zodiac. And so our last time that Jupiter was in Sag, as you can see on your screen, was most of 2007. That's when it had its conjunction with Pluto in late 2007. And then, of course, we all know what happened in 2008 when Pluto went into Capricorn, Jupiter went into Capricorn. We're on Jupiter and Capricorn in a year. I always like to put this in every year because for those of you who work with clients and study charts, anytime you see Jupiter in an aspect to another planet, just assume that Jupiter's impact or interaction with that planet is going to magnify everything. Venus, magnify love. Pluto, magnify everything to an extreme depth and intensity for the soul. Saturn, magnify everything in regards to responsibility, good and bad. And so, you know, we're going to have an interchangeable archetype here with Jupiter in its own sign. Jupiter is the ruler of Sagittarius and the 9th house. So in the world of the zodiac, or what we will sometimes call solar astrology, Jupiter moving through Sag is going to be starting a brand new 12-year cycle through the zodiac, starting with its own initiation into Sag, where it's going to be the strongest. It's just a doubling down of its own energy and archetypes. Now, Jupiter, Sag, 9th house, active polarity, energy moving out from the center, mutable modality, interchangeable, adapting, trying to put it all together, and of course the fire element, which is going to be that spark and sense of destiny and creative spirit. We'll talk about that a little more as we go on. But first of all, here are some of the principles of Jupiter in Sag. It is, first of all, the right brain, the intuition, and our 6th sense. Both Jupiter and planets transiting through Sag will tap into larger forces in the universe, and they'll just download that knowledge. We know that we know something, but we can't quite figure out how we know it in a logical 1 + 1 = 2 fashion. It just arrives in and of its own in our consciousness. Now, when we tap into these larger forces of the universe from the perspective of evolutionary astrology, you can be tapping into the separating forces or the returning forces, what your more religious terms would call evil and good. Only don't see it so black and white. Separating forces and separating desires can be the desire for a new lover, a new job, a new car, etc. Jupiter in Sag is going to be this principle of growth. Jupiter is expansion. Again, active polarity in the element of fire. It is that spark of energy that can go a zillion different directions. And so Jupiter, Sag, 9th house rules education in its broadest sense. That is the principle of growth. Every day brings us something new to learn. How well do we assimilate and integrate that which we're learning. And so we can Gemini, third house polarity, we can take in the fact, in ideas and words, the details of the world, but wants to put it together and make out of it into larger and concepts. We are going to know the fundamental laws in the universe. Now, in evolutionary astrology, there's what we call nat or timeless and spiritual understanding. Truth is timeless, universal level, whether we can tap into it or not. And what you will find if you look at planet Earth and all its different nationalities and races, you're going to find we all tap into it in different ways. You tap into these universal laws differently than the street or the hall. And yet, exist regardless of whether or not you understand them. 12 years through its own sign of Sagittarius, the energy increases and expands to face some of those limitations of what we know to be our truth and broaden it into the next step of understanding timeless universe. While it spiritual belief systems relate to personal belief systems, including religious dogma, you know, area, the end of I had another family funeral. Jupiter in or Pluto. And then is this one. Down, let me know if it's coming through. The out. I'm going to keep talking and then he's going to give me Pluto transiting my 12th house, sorry. There was my March. It was just a real interesting experience for me. Ceremony and the to bury the body. It's going to make it last for thousands of years, but Jesus comes back onto the planet, is that body up. It was just, oh, this is really, even my, and it was just very much on the religious side, and it was just, God, far I have come. Bitter natally in my 9th house. What will happen when what we consider to be our personal truth have a specific come through and perhaps cling to make us feel secure. Information which comes at threatens that security based leap. We don't want to deal in. We judge complete and utter resistance. And yeah, what the archetype of Jupiter, Sag, and will be emphasized through Sagittarius. Census, individuated. we're all going to come up against something within our belief system that will threaten our security. And the question is how well can we go over to that Gemini third house polarity and really take the new information in and see if we can broaden what we know to be our. So Jupiter and Saturn, an emphasis on evolving our conscious belief system so we can have a better and better understanding of why we're all here. What's it all mean? Where'd I come from? Where am I going? How do I better and broader principles increase metaphysical study, way we perceive ourselves? So let me just stop in, Leroy. Coming across better?
Not for me. However, I just sent out a chat kind of asking some feedback from our entire audience. So is everybody getting the audio clear on the external side? Is it just me breaking up here in our home studio? So if somebody could kind of respond to that chat message in the chat pane on your little GoToWebinar control panel, it'd be nice to get that feedback just so that we can decide how to proceed. If everybody's getting some broken audio, we might need to exit, re-enter. Okay. Thank you, Irma. Okay, thank you, Carmela. Appreciate that. Sounds like we're fine externally. It's just something in house here. So, yep. Thank you, Fred. So we're all clear, Kim. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. And so, hey, everybody out there who's listening live, if things start to go out and you do not let Leroy, okay. Thank you very much. Even though we're about 10 days away from Mercury retrograde, Jupiter moving into Sag, that Sag Gemini stuff, we're in the shadow of, we're in the pre-shadow of Mercury retrograde already. So Jupiter through Sag is going to be that principle of seeking knowledge through study, experiences, and travel. So we're not just going to want to be having spiritual or metaphysical study, growth, understanding. As we said, Jupiter is higher for spirit. Here where Gemini education, we can have how we educate children, how we college should it for venture past K-12. So we'll also find lots of issues involving travel, be it refugees from climate, political, be just wanting, be able to travel. For instance, Egypt suffered a lot of decline in travel after they had their Arab Spring. So there's been a real crack and effort to bring the tourist to the pyramids. Have those kinds of examples maybe in the, but with this principle of seeking, many times when we go, this is long distance travels, continent or another country, go into a society than the one that we live in. Contrast, polarity expands our knowledge. Different foods have different religions, and they just have different from day to day, familial, or even their environments is different, exposes us to broader understandings. Now, be born into society that we don't feel comfortable with. We can be born into a family that's quite dogmatic with religious tendencies, tendencies that go beyond religion. Of what happens here with Jupiter. Time to time, we're going to go through what's called alienation. And this is where we recognize our difference. And what the alienation is again, differentiate and, well, what is this knowledge for me? For me, what do I believe? Conditioned with by my society. And so have the courage different in that alien into one of those Jupiter station. I can't stand fudge who I really am, along with my family or whatever group, even the religion to be a part of at space and time. And we're compensating on who we really are. Sooner or later, the Gemini third house polarity is going to expose it and give us an opportunity to break free on our own. So alienated by society, and sometimes we'll to alienate ourselves because we can't live the quote unquote life more. In that when you're working with charts, observe and correlate can come in any area of. You would naturally look to planets or planets that are in the 9th house. You can look for aspects to Jupiter. And that'll give you some kind of clues on where a soul may have some of that alienation going on. Now, what will happen with Jupiter transiting through Sag over this next year is we can have groups of people go through alienation. Just look at the Central American caravans of refugees traveling through another country to get to the United States. Where do they feel supported? Where do they feel alienated? To break free the gang crimes down there and find a way to just make a. Some will go, some will settle in Mexico, some in the United States. That issue will probably next year with Jupiter and Jupiter Sag in the 9th house also deal with the principle of language communication. And with Jupiter and Sag being right brain and intuition, Jeffrey Green would say, you know that you have a very dominant right brain when you pick up a book and you turn it over to the back cover and read that first before opening the book. or you read, you go to the end before even the beginning of the book. It's an or okay, we're going to look. Again, Jupiter moving is going to be conceptual in the abstract, to know picture, versus my third house, which is left brain. Give me the details. Give me what I can physically grasp. 1 + 1 = 2. And of course, with Jupiter ruling knowledge and the concept of languages, it is naturally the speaker, the teacher, the writer, the preacher. And sometimes we'll look at that preacher versus teacher syndrome. The teacher wants to share information and broaden knowledge. Sometimes the preacher wants to convert and convince. In other words, don't rock that boat and interrupt the security that I have gotten under my way of understanding the universe. I just want you to agree with it. Whereas most of the time, but not all the time, when teachers are educating, they're trying to teach you to be a critical thinker and learn for yourself, as much as take what they say as any type of gospel. Now, something to understand, and this is carrying on from what I was saying a little before with the whole books thing. Our language systems of the East have a different structuring with their words than the language systems of the Western Hemisphere. Now, language systems of the Eastern Hemisphere, we're talking more further east, kind of like India and all of the Oriental Chinese, Japanese languages, where their symbols are concepts versus words. So in the West, our language is a word describes a fact, a detail, an object. They're kind of more Gemini third house languages. Whereas in the East, their languages are more characters and they'll describe an entire concept. And with those Eastern languages, you can change one character and it can alter the whole expression of a concept or change the concept entirely. So one of the things we can expect to be coming through with the news over the next year, miscommunications. Here's what I said. Do what I say, not what I do. That little phrase. Well, I'll have someone make some statement in the news and then they're going to be apologizing for it and saying, oh, that wasn't racist. I didn't mean that way. Jupiter can involve the whole concept of race too. It's not limited to one archetype of the zodiac. Because Jupiter can have that individual way in which we bring down knowledge and beliefs that will then become geographically based. If one country is different, we have then the people of that country being different. One is red colored, black colored. So race gets involved in that whole area of Jupiter, Sag, and 9th house as well. So again, we can have people express something and then say, nope, excuse me, that wasn't what I meant. So all of us will probably go through lessons in learning to speak more clearly, speak more directly. When Jupiter in Sag is compensating, they're only going to say what you want to hear rather than being honest and telling you what they really think. And so asking for someone to just be direct and really be honest in communicating with you becomes very, very important. And by the way, I say this a lot with clients. If you're trying to stand in your truth just as honestly as you can, that is what will vibrate out into the universe, law of attraction, and that is what will then come back to you. So the coworker or the intimate partner or the family member that attempts to lie outright or attempts to compensate with you, they're not going to get away with it. Their lie will be exposed because the energies are not vibrating. If you want to look at this on a broad collective level, oh God, what did I just hear in the news recently? As the midterm elections in the US have been going into this final stretch, Donald Trump has went from 5 lies a day to now telling an average of 30 lies a day. And this is just what the press is following, and the press is going fact check, fact check, fact check. And so collectively, for him to be walking, talking the lie as much as he has, as long as he has, I really think that Jupiter and Sag, and then Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto and Capricorn, the lies are going to catch up with him. Stay tuned. We'll see how this plays out on the collective stage between Trump and other countries, other national leaders, all over the place, many different examples. And so again, relative to the polarity of Gemini in the third house, there will be confrontations with Jupiter and Sag. And again, specifically wanting to expand our limitations, where we're stuck on a personal or limited version of truth versus universal timeless truth, and confrontations to expose the lies versus the truth. Remember that fire element is spirit. It's that spark of energy. Well, in Sag, it can lead to exaggerations. You know, we caught the fish and it was 12 inches. The next time you tell the story, the fish was 15 inches. And the next time it was, 20 inches and the biggest fish that ever came out of that lake. All you have to do is just listen a little bit to Donald Trump with South Node in Moon conjunct Sag, and you'll get some idea of what we're talking about with this whole exaggeration factor. So there'll be confrontations to expose within ourselves where we're compensating, where we're not being authentic, where we're not standing in our own truth. How well can you be evolving into that over the next year? And of course, as I said, we all reach the boundaries of what we're comfortable and secure with, and it gets busted. And the purpose is to not get defensive, even though we may. The purpose is that pebble in the pond that ripples out. We have a limitation of personal truth exposed to expand into broader truth, broader truth, broader truth, until we can learn to understand natural laws and principles. So what we want to do here with Jupiter transiting through Sagittarius is to just be as open-minded as we possibly can. And I have 5 planets in the 9th house. I have 2 planets in Sag. I have 7 of the 10 major planets in the archetype of Sagittarius and the 9th house. I've really had to face some of my own anger, defensiveness, rigidity, judgmentalness at those who are lesser aware. And I've been having some inner conversations. You know, Kimberly, you just got to find your next layer of inner peace and allowing a family member to be where they're at on their journey. Allowing someone else in the neighborhood to be where they're at, allowing others to be where they are on their journey, having conversations. Can you learn how to have those conversations non-judgmentally? Can you, the communication things we talk about? Well, from my perspective, this is my understanding of it. And so this is another thing that belongs to Jupiter, Sag in ninth house. How can you learn to express yourself through the language of communicating in such a way that the other party can not only hear you, they can understand you? You talk under somebody, they're bored. You talk over somebody, they're confused. All of that kind of energy is going to be what each of us can be learning over this next year. Leroy has a beautiful face. We adopted it from the Teachings of Abraham by Esther Hicks. When we find our household making a little bit of a Virgo judgmental cup half empty statement, one of us comes back and says, wouldn't it be nice? And we rephrase the statement to be just a little less judgmental, just a little more open to things changing. You could make that one of your phrases. Wouldn't it be nice? XYZ. Wouldn't it be nice if all the family members who vote differently than me could sit down and have some deep conversation without feeling judged or exposed? Play with it on a variety of different subjects if you want. Now, Jupiter Sag in the ninth house is also the principle of experiencing visions into the future. We can do this on an individual basis, and one of the lessons that can come up is that intuitive vision may just be a reflection of our own subconscious desires. And when that's the case, it creates that self-fulfilled prophecy because we are just focusing on that. And we think it was meant to be. And so one of the things that you can work with in these visions is relative to Uranus. Pay attention to the element of repetition and see if it comes once or twice, or see if it comes up again. Another thing that you can do relative to Neptune and the archetype of Pisces, Neptune transiting Pisces, what would you have me know, Source? Question it. Show me the truth. I energize that whatever is highest and best for myself and all others involved is what actually comes to pass. There's that open-mindedness on an individual level so that the natural energies of Jupiter and Sagittarius can bring along what is highest and best for your soul versus what is especially Jupiter finishing up Scorpio, especially compared to what is an emotional yearning or separating desire that you've just got to have in order to feel okay or secure. Question your visions. Ask for what is highest and best for all concerned. Really, you know, Jupiter Sag in the ninth house is the archetype of nature as well. Nature is the natural church. And so when something is bothering you, again, the mutable modality of Sag ninth and Gemini third is movement. And movement is how we can move beyond confusion. And so if you are confused or you question, is this meant to be? Or is this what is highest and best? Just getting out and taking a walk in nature, or going to the gym, or even getting in your car and driving, or getting in the transit system of a major city will be enough to create that movement that can allow your intuition to step in and help you make larger sense of anything. Help you give you that intuitive hit that's real and authentic and highest and best for yourself and all concerned. Now, sometimes we'll have experiences of the future or visions of the future that's going to be on a more collective or planetary level. And sometimes these visions will be accurate, and sometimes they won't come to pass. And this will reflect that free choice of humanity. Just on an individual soul level, we, each have free will to go as fast or as slow as our soul desires in our evolutionary journey. We have that collectively as groups of people. And if you look at this relative to approximately 7 out of 10 souls on planet Earth being consensus, they follow the consensus conditionings that can't see beyond the space-time they live in. It makes humanity or collective groups really want to cling to security or cling to that past and project the past forward. Things don't always happen as fast as we would like them to. And then sometimes we'll have those cataclysmic events that come along. You tell me the people of Houston and the people who got affected by Hurricane Florence in the Carolinas and Hurricane Michael in northern Florida. Tell me they aren't starting to wonder about climate change. There will be some of those even in consensus that will get intuitive hits about how they're going to rebuild if they stay in that area. Wait a minute, I've got to rebuild my home to withstand the next hurricane when it comes, not if it comes. So there's a whole, wide variety of things we may start to see on collective level. And of course, when it comes to the truth versus lies, there will be a lot of people out there in that scientific community who will say, here's the facts, Gemini third house polarity. Here's the truth. Here's the details. They'll start to express some of the collective visions, even in the realm of science. For instance, one of the things that's recently been tracked is the fact that the oceans are warming faster than they projected. Now, that is probably one of the most precarious things in regards to the future of climate change. is the faster the oceans warm, the faster the ice caps melt, and the more it changes the weather patterns on planet Earth. Look at this from the perspective of Central America. We hear that the citizens there are leaving because of the gang violence, which is probably very, very true. But what else is going on in Central America that's not always making the news? They are one of the hardest hit regions of the world with climate change. The El Ninos and what is it? El Ninos and La Ninas, the big weather currents that come off of the Pacific Ocean and drying out Central America. Farmers are starving in Guatemala and Honduras and that whole area. They're actually leaving and joining these due to not being able as much. But you know what? Who's screaming and exaggerating? Sagittarius? Gang violence is easier to talk about than climate change. Stay tuned. We'll see if that gets into the news more and more and more. Now, I mean, there may be archetypes of Jupiter that I did not. If there's something that you want to ask about that I have not mentioned in regards to Jupiter through Sagittarius, please feel free to bring it up. You can raise your hand and interact on the board with me or live with me if you have headset, or you can type something into the Q&A panel with Leroy and he can speak for you if you want to. So I want to go through Jupiter and Sag related to all of the other planets. This is moving into some of the cycles with Jupiter through Sagittarius over the next year. A lot of times when we look at any two planetary pairs, we look from conjunction to conjunction. And of course, Jupiter moving through a sign of the zodiac about a year at a time. It's going to relate to the Sun and Mercury and Venus with their annual cycles as well, Mars 2-year cycles. So right here, we're just seeing Jupiter, Sun conjunct Jupiter from conjunction to conjunction. And as you can see, Sun conjunct Jupiter will be November 26th at about 4 degrees Sag. Whenever Jupiter has a retrograde cycle, the trines with the Sun are almost included on both sides of the opposition. Sun, Jupiter, we have two fire elements here. So these two planets are always seeking creative inspiration. Remember how we said Jupiter can just make everything go to extreme or it can exaggerate it? Well, what we have to look at with Sun and creativity relative to Jupiter, and especially Jupiter and Sagittarius, and we get these intuitive hits and these visions. What can we physically achieve? And what is a great intuitive hit, but it's just not manifestable right now? And we'll talk about this more when we get to Saturn in Capricorn. But we have to, again, as you're looking at, and I have a tendency to many times put the hard aspects in, conjunction, squares, oppositions, because they're more tension filled, and we notice those aspects a little more. Not to say that sextiles and trines don't matter, and you can look at these here if you want to follow it, okay? But we have to, you know, be able to say, okay, I can do this. that might be just me dreaming. That might be me being just a little more overconfident than what is maybe realistic within my world. Because Sun, Leo, fifth house, it is that spark of creative destiny, and we know what it is. Jupiter, Sag, ninth house. Is it for my highest and best good? And that's where the two are going to have to compromise a little bit. And of course, Sun Jupiter is going to be wanting to, again, this would be one of the main planets that will be kind of activating our expansion and growth and just wanting to learn something out there in the world, even if it's just going back to school traditionally or non-traditionally. And even if it's just, really show me the truth. I'm really interested in my spiritual studies. And so Sun will be an impetus for this. Now, what will also happen, especially during the Jupiter retrograde in Sagittarius, is there will be exposure to any weak links to any philosophies or belief systems. You could find Jupiter and Sag that there might be some religious scandals in the news. In regards to the Catholic Church and the molestation of children by priests, there may be legal ramifications. Jupiter has rulership of law in traditional society. Our laws come from our philosophies. So if we have a philosophy that says it is inhuman or wrong to sexually abuse children, we'll create laws that reflect that. And so there will be some exposure to this in regards to religions and belief systems. What other scandals are going to be evolved? Believe it or not, the Catholic Church is looking at letting priests marry in their Southern Hemisphere churches because they can't get anybody to go into the seminaries and become a priest. Whoa. I thought, oh my gosh, Jupiter and Sag, they allow priests to marry in the Southern Hemisphere. What do you think the priests in the Northern Hemisphere are going to say? What do you think the public is going to say? Now, of course, as we said earlier, the intuition in the right brain is going to be activated all year long with Jupiter in Sag. And so if the intuitive hit comes out of the blue and it's like, whoa, where did that come from? That may be a more real and honest hit for yourself. Rather than yearning and pining, for example, to have a relationship with this one person and you're yearning for it so much, I'm repeating the example before, that every tiny little thing that happens, you just take it as gospel that it was just meant to be. No, how objective can I be in all of this intuition? Now, when Jupiter goes retrograde, the highlight is the Jupiter opposition to the Sun. It's going to be about 19.5 degrees Gemini in mid-June. During Jupiter's retrograde, as you can see on the dates, Jupiter's retrograde about 4 months out of the year. It goes retrograde, oh gosh, what was it? Kind of like a week or two later, a couple weeks later every year. So it's moving forward through the calendar. But Jupiter retrograde is going to be a natural time period to review our belief systems and any attachments to limited beliefs for security reasons. So again, we expose the preacher versus teacher syndrome. And Then we're going to expose the weak link in any issue. We're going to expose the lie in any issue or argument. I said before, you can expect immigration issues to be in the news. Will we evolve our philosophies around immigration through Jupiter in Sagittarius? I don't know how many of you people follow Robert Reich. Reich? He's a Democrat. He used to be in the cabinet under one of our Democratic presidents. I don't remember which one, but he said in regards to part of the way in which we could solve our Social Security crises is to allow in the immigrants and to bring them into the system, because they will pay Social Security and Medicare taxes. And as the baby boomers retire and the young ones coming up are less populated generations, we are expanding the generational base that will pay in taxes to support our system. I thought, wow, that was an interesting concept. Let's see if this is something that naturally happens over the next 10 years or so. And will this concept be exposed through Jupiter and Sag? Here's what's real, here's what's truth. And of course, education, as we said, Jupiter is higher education, but it's also the philosophy of educating our children. One of the issues that's been coming up for the United States is who's going to pay for the cost of college. And another issue that's coming up is the United States has public school systems, and there is a push by conservative or exclusive interests to have what they call choice. And the whole reasoning behind choice is these are private, for-profit educational systems. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. We could see scandals with some of these choice school systems being exposed over the next year. Here is the chart for the Jupiter opposition to the Sun on June 10th. What's interesting is we're going to have a grand cross. It's going to make 3 last quarter squares. But for an event chart, this is really bringing that whole philosophical debate into the picture. And what is on have planets in Cancer conjuncting the North Node, opposing these planets in Capricorn conjunct the South Node. And so the Cancer Capricorn opposition is going to be, in my eyes, the plutocrats versus the public, or the grassroots, the haves versus the have-nots. What I see again from this Grand Cross is all kinds of philosophical issues being debated. Immigration, nationalism versus globalism, our power structures. How are we going to structure politics in this country? Finances, the public versus private banking movement, gender issues, Cancer, Capricorn, our legal structures with that Grand Cross in there, and of course the educational systems as well. There will be, all kinds of debates around this stuff. If by some chance in the United States, the Democrats take over the House, Republicans control the Senate, will there be communications and philosophical debate? Will there just be lines in the sand? We've been through so much. find out over the next couple of days where this Jupiter and Sag philosophy is going to go. Again, expect education in the news, and what is it over 30 years is we have forced the finance from to basically private organizations, and it has caused the interest on college to skyrocket. Mention the cost to as well. Area of that the costs have increased even more than, and it isn't anybody talks anybody's doing anything about. Now, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth on the progressive or inclusive sides have been saying, we do it in other countries, we should be able to do it in the United States as well. How will we pay for that? It will come through taxes one way or another. But to quote Nelson Mandela here on your screen, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. It's like Mandela and Gandhi being able to bring huge shifts in their countries, you know, Africa and India without war. And they did it through changing the minds of the public. So here's another quote. A mind when stretched by a new idea never regains its original dimensions. It's Jupiter and Sag. Here was an interesting figure as I was doing some of my prep work. Blue, the countries pay for their own college education individually. Orange, countries that offer free education. In other words, the entire tax. And the taxes are used not just through senior. The taxes stretch it out to through 4 years of college. E and read does you will have high levels of education. Not a complete. This is college. This doesn't the trade. This is college only. You start to change. Sagittarius is that still be that college or white, but the technical schools and the blue is going to continue to expand. We those who can robots. They're saying with Donald Trump's new trade agreement with Canada and Mexico that the jobs that will come back in this country are going to be robotic jobs. It's not necessarily going to make more people employed in manufacturing in the United States. We're going to need workers skilled enough to run the robot, to run the artificial intelligence. News, you know, and $50 million toward, and the majority of that to go towards schoolers. How to there's one of those other shifts in education we are going to see happening. All we need to do is if you support the public banking movement, and this is for real in the state of North Dakota, who's had its own bank as a state for 100 years. One of its 4 mandates is student loans. And North Dakota has the lowest default per capita on student loans because it doesn't charge, 9, 10, 12% interest on its college loans. I don't know what the exact rate is, but I'm thinking it was like under 5%, something like 4 or 5%. If the public banking movement takes off, and that to me is just a when, not an if, then states and cities can still loan out for college or trade. But what if interest was 1%? And you were paying for that, you have to work down the cost. But if interest was, not compounded on thousands of dollars of debt, difference in the whole education field as well. Stay tuned. Whoops, I'm sorry. I keep hitting. We'll see what trends, some, all, even shift over the next year. Now, axis, remember that nodal axis in Cancer Capricorn? It's going to be 30 degrees off or 150 degrees off from Jupiter and Sag. So the south node is going to make a waning semi-sextile to Jupiter, finishing up a past emotional cycle. Where are we going to want to maintain security, South Node and Cap, at the cost of truth? How willing can you be to confront your past and be real and honest with it? To evolve your understandings of your emotional past woundedness. The North Node is a waxing in conjunct to Jupiter. This is where it's going to require an inner emotional adjustment. North Node Cancer, inner security, inner self-reliance in order to grow. So we need the emotional courage to stand in our own truth and be emotionally honest with ourselves and with others. Mercury, Mercury goes retrograde about once every 3-4 months. And we're on the eve of a Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius. During the year that Jupiter's in Sag, there will be 2 Mercury retrograde cycles that make aspects with Jupiter. This upcoming Mercury retrograde cycle, by the way, the free Mercury retrograde is a week from tonight, November 12th, Monday, 6 to 8 Mountain Time. Look for the email to show up to register. Make sure you register so that if you don't attend live, you'll get the link to the free forecast from the email service. Jupiter's retrograde in Sag. Jupiter is going to aspect every single planet except Neptune. Extremely busy Jupiter retrograde cycle. Remember we said Mercury, Gemini 3rd house, left brain, Jupiter, Sag, 9th house, right brain. When Mercury's retrograde, it is surrendering left brain to right brain. Now this particular Mercury retrograde in Sag, pointing towards Gemini, it's going to intensify that truth versus lies. It's going to have us with a bit of brain switching back and forth, and there can be that confusion that comes up. And so it behooves us to, again, have movement, have exercise, have that time outdoors and in nature, getting away from distractions so those mental, intuitive hits can come through. And with Jupiter having 3 conjunctions, I think I got this in my next slide, so I'll wait for that. The distortions of Mercury retrograde. Mercury gets very defensive. My way's right, you're wrong. And so we're going to have to watch that tendency all the way through. Jupiter in Sag, but we'll have to really watch it in this Mercury retrograde coming up, and then the one where Mercury waxing squares Jupiter as well. Let me give you a little more information first. Because Jupiter, again, is in its own sign, it's going to give us a year of being able to dig deep and really have an increase in intuitive hits. So in general, when Mercury's retrograde, and I think there's going to be 4 Mercury retrogrades through Jupiter and Sag, even when it's not aspecting Jupiter, it's going to be strong to throw off old facts, false facts. It's going to be strong to receive those intuitive messages of Jupiter and Sag. And Jupiter's ruling the year, and it rules when Mercury's retrograde. Because Mercury's rulership of Gemini points to Sag, Mercury's rulership of Virgo points to Pisces. And so, again, intuitive hit, spark, gut instinct, aha moments. This is next year. So here's what I wrote. Mercury retrograde in Sag conjunctions, the one we're just on, potential for strong revelations about truth versus lies. And oh my gosh, if by some way there is, the potential here to have midterm elections in the US just say no way to Donald Trump's claims, and it can really send a strong statement. Again, we'll know in a couple of days. I think this Mercury retrograde, we may find things out about the Mueller investigation with Donald Trump over his presidential election, obstruction, interference, and of course, all the money issues that are coming out. Stay tuned. I have a slide on that. And then when we have that next Mercury retrograde cycle that's going to come late this winter, early next spring, Mercury in Pisces is going to make waxing squares to Jupiter and Sag. There's going to be some type of crises over our beliefs. What's real? What's true? I'm wondering if we're going to reach a turning point where we start to really recognize, and not buy into a lot of the lies, where journalism, which journalists, by the way, are a Jupiter Sag thing, where journalists are going to gain their respectability and be held in esteem because they're, sometimes in the U.S. they call it the fourth estate, one of the after the executive, congressional, and judicial branches of government. That First Amendment in journalists, they're the fourth branch. And, they're to have that ability to freely speak the truth in a democracy. You can't underestimate that. Stay tuned. We'll see what happens. The distortions with the Jupiter and Sag are just going to be, more entrenchment into following what we believe. I had oh, by the way, Leroy and I have 4 young bloods in our life. They're all Pluto and Scorpios. We are 4 for 4 with voting. They all 4 voted. In 2016, only 1 of those 4 young bloods voted. So I feel good about that. But anyway, my point was, I had a point that I was I lost it. It'll come back. I'll tell you what it was when it comes back. I had something. Mm, I was excited to tell you about that. Trying to the truth of journalism. That was it. One of these young bloods posted on Facebook some Twitter statement by a conservative talk show radio host, and was just going, wow, this is interesting. And I didn't respond back. This is one of my nephews. I didn't respond back on his page. I just privately messaged him. And I said, you really need to go search out who this person is before you just blindly take what they're saying on facts. It's that whole alt-right belief that a liberal billionaire, I think his name's George Soros is funding the entire Mexican caravan. And so they were just, they're supplying this and that and this and that, and it had nothing to do with the truth. And so I took the time to just go search the Associated Press articles. Associated Press been around for 100 years, about as neutral as you can get if you're wanting a neutral source of what's facts, Gemini polarity. And I sent him a couple of articles and I said, you got scammed by fake news from the right. And so he went and read the articles and, looked at all the information and went, oh yeah, I guess I better pay attention to what the source of the information is. This is something that I think that will evolve for all of us during Jupiter and Sagittarius. And it will have the big conglomerates of social media having to get, better and better and better at it. They say they're putting resources to it, but they're not putting nearly enough resources to it. And they're counting on us, the public, to do their work for them and flag it and tell them, and they're going to have to create some better algorithms. They're going to have to increase some employees and give up some of that profit to really get to that point of sharing and monitoring what's real and factual, or they're going to lose their social media participants. Venus and Sag, conjunction to conjunction, as you can see on your screen. And the red is always the aspects that are taking place when Jupiter's retrograde. And of course, Venus Jupiter, it's evolving our values around truth versus lies. And so how much do we value the truth, even when it makes us uncomfortable? Or will we compromise with a lie because our values around abortion or voter suppression or keeping immigrants out are so strong, we'll compromise on our values? Thank you, any international listeners, for allowing me to use the US as example most of the time. Now, if you look at this, what are our values around truth versus lies? On a personal level, if you find your intimate partner lies to you or deceives you, you get quite upset, don't you? And if you're lying or deceiving your partner, you better be prepared for Jupiter and Sag to expose it somehow, some way. So we'll get really upset on a personal level, but collectively, look at all the hypocrisy that's going on, especially, as I look at it from the conservative sides of things. We get the Supreme Court justices we want. We keep the immigrants out of our country. We have the possibility of making abortion illegal in the US. So I'll hold my nose no matter how yucky I think Donald Trump is, and I will vote for him just so that I can get what I want on the issues. That is hypocrisy. That is not standing in integrity of your own principles and values. We don't have a Venus or Mars retrograde next year. We'll see where all this goes. More of the same, or does it start to change? Now, I think we'll start to see some of the lawsuits from the Me Too movement making it through the news, be it the Harvey Weinstein, be it with Donald Trump. He still has 2 lawsuits going on, not necessarily the Me Too movement, but various females that are accusing him of defamation. I think, Kevin Spacey could easily look at having some legal charges against him. Stay tuned. We'll see. Again, the whole value system around larger spiritual principles. I did a free webinar, Neptune in Pisces midpoint, and it is on our YouTube channel, Evolutionary Astro Net, or Leroy will put it up there real soon if he hasn't already. But in this Neptune in Pisces midpoint public webinar, I talked about the fact of when, and I'm not going to remember the details right now but of when the Catholic Church decided that priests could not marry. And what are we going to look at through this second half of Neptune in Pisces? Could there be a change? And this was before I had read that the Catholic Church was looking at allowing priests in the Southern Hemisphere to marry. Could we value the natural law of 2 genders and allowing for that natural sexuality to take place between the 2 genders, regardless of religion and regardless of your position in a religion? I don't know if there are other religions that deny the right to marry besides the Catholic Church or not. Obviously, they're probably the biggest one. Mars is a 2-year cycle with most planets, and that is the case with the outer planets. And so, as we can see, Mars is going to go from square to square with Jupiter throughout Sag. Mars and Jupiter is going to be similar almost to Neptune, Mars-Neptune. Honesty in actions. And so the distortions of Jupiter and Sag, who's going to get away with what lie? Who's going to have what con artist scheme? Who's going to be, the used car salesman, so to speak? Who's going, to be mixing Kool-Aid and asking you to drink it? Mars actions. We can find a lot of motivation from our religious and spiritual beliefs on both the inclusive and the exclusive sides. And of course, I think the whole refugee crises, this is going to expand through Jupiter and Sag for, all kinds of reasons, including the whole legal issue. It is legal to apply for asylum in the United States when you're coming from a country outside. You can expect there to be lawsuits, actions in regards to that in the news over the next year. We'll see which way that goes. But refugees from war, from just political strife and gender, for those wanting gender freedom wherever they still or will outlaw homosexuality. And of course, what's going to overtake it even beyond war, as we talked earlier, is the whole issue of climate change. This is the uncomfortable growing pains of becoming a global village. And it's not something that's going to be solved in a 1-year transit of Jupiter through its own sign, Sag. It won't even be solved through Pluto in Capricorn. It could get worse through Pluto in Aquarius in the near future for 2 decades. It might be Pluto in Pisces before we really start to recognize that we are a global community, and I have that. Pluto goes into Pisces 2043, and it'll be in Pisces for 25 years. So we're looking at the 2040s, 50s, and 60s. I think that's when we're really going to have to be accepting the global village. It's not that countries will cease to exist, but just like the European Union came together to make it easier to move between borders, we'll see that concept expanding in various ways, maybe between continents, maybe just on one continent, like North American or North American and South American. Stay tuned. We don't know how that's going to quite unfold. Now, with Jupiter in regards to the outer planets, this has been true last year. This will be last few years. This will be true over the next year as well. This won't change until 2020. But Jupiter has been in the second half of its planetary pair to each of the 5 outer planets, classifying Chiron and Pluto loosely in the planetary category. And so Jupiter's growth and expansion, because waxing is building, waning is releasing. And so Jupiter's growth and expansion are limited to what the outer planets will accept. Now let's just look forward for a moment into the future with Jupiter. I said this last year, and this bears repeating over the next few years. Jupiter will conjunct the 5 outer planets in a 4-year time period, 2020 through 2024. And yes, it will take place through the midst of the transiting Pluto conjunctions to the natal Pluto in the U.S. chart. Those 3 conjunctions take place in 2022 at 27.5 degrees Capricorn. It's taking place in the midst of our soul, death, and rebirth on a collective level in the United States. Now, here are the conjunctions. Jupiter will make those 3 conjunctions to Pluto. And then, as you can see, the Saturn one, we've been talking about the 3 of them meeting in the sky in 2020. But then Jupiter will go on in 22, 23, 24, and conjunct Neptune, Chiron, and Uranus. So it's going to be the second half of those 2020s before Jupiter is waxing phase. So all of those planets and everything really busting out, breaking loose in new ways, whichever it's going to go, inclusive versus exclusive. Now, Jupiter specifically in 2019 through its transit in Sag will make 3 aspects to the 4 outer planets. Won't aspect Chiron except for once, I think, and that does that in Scorpio. Jupiter and Saturn, it's a 20-year cycle. Here's what we have going on now. Saturn went into Capricorn a year ago. It's in its own sign almost 3 years. Jupiter's going into Sag. They are both in their own rulerships, so they're both strong. And in solar astrology, when a planet goes into the sign it rules, it starts a new solar cycle or a new zodiac cycle, could be maybe a more proper term for it. So those interplays between Jupiter expansions, Jupiter and Sag, and Saturn contractions, Saturn and Capricorn, they're going to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And this is going to come out as what we are going to call inclusive and exclusive swings of power, or progressive versus conservative swings of power. This is going to be true no matter what country you live in. And it's unknown as who will come out stronger. Say, for instance, the Democrats in the United States. They're hoping that they'll have a pendulum swing from the 2016 presidential election, but they're starting to realize that it doesn't stop November 7th. They have to keep building from the grassroots up. And the base gets excited the more progressive they are. So just like the conservative or the Republican Party in the United States over the last 10, 20 years, funded mainly by the Koch brothers and Prosperity for America and ALEC, American Legislative Exchange Council, that wrote all of the state legislative bills that have been passed over the last 10, 20 years. They went back to and started ground up, and their efforts paid off. And now the Democrats are realizing we can't just go for it in the urban areas. We've got to go for it across the norm. And so you can see this through the Jupiter and Sag relating to Saturn and Capricorn and who has the power. Even though Jupiter is balsamic Saturn and won't have, well, there'll, excuse me, I had that wrong. It will have the 3 semi-sextiles. Even though I'll show you those in a moment, I still think that Jupiter and Sag will be laying seed thoughts here through the conjunction and through the next 20-year cycle. And that next 20-year cycle starts the end of 2020 at 0 degrees Aquarius. Talk about energizing the Aquarian revolution. It's going to come when Jupiter gets Aquarius. But here's the 3 waning semi-sextiles that Jupiter is going to have to Saturn from Sag Capricorn. It's balsamic phase, and balsamic phase is resolution and bringing things to completion. So it's about resolving the karma, hopefully. And many times with these two, it's going to require societal adjustments. So it's going to expose distortions of social issues, distortions of social norms. And collective groups in every country around the world will be deciding, what are we going to allow and what will we not allow? Will we protect our journalists in our country, or will we allow our journalists to be assassinated? Will we make it a priority to educate children? Will we make it a priority, or will we allow immigrants to come to our country, especially if we fought wars in their country? Stay tuned. We don't know. Of course, one of the distortions we'll have here with Saturn in Capricorn is one group attempting to have power over another group. So the distortions and everything going on with that. And Leroy, mute. Okay, I thought I was going to sneeze. I was able to talk past it. So while Jupiter is going to be trying to have some of these expansions and deep philosophical talks, over the next year, Saturn and Capricorn still going to try and have the control and play into the ugliness of prejudice and the ugliness of social issues and the ugliness of not sharing between the haves and the have-nots. Oops. Hold on a second. There we go. Here's my slide. Had to get just one in. For those of you who are not aware of my advocacy of public banking, I think that this is really going to step up as these planets get into Capricorn. It's going to catch a wave over the next 3-4 years. Central banks are just the non-commercial bank that may or may be independent of government that basically needs to conduct monetary policy and keep the financial system stable. Sometimes they issue currency notes. Sometimes they act as a banker to the government. They supervise financial institutions. They regulate pay systems. Well, when we have private central banks, which the United States does, which Canada does, which most of European countries do, that profit or interest when we pay back the loan ends up in private coffers. It ends up going to the CEOs and shareholders. Profits generated from public bank credit are returned to the public. We don't have to pay the shareholders dividends. That interest or that profit gained from interest goes back to taxpayers and citizens, such as programs for the youth and taking care of our elderly. It can go towards infrastructure. It can go towards universal health care. It can go towards paying for college costs. I highly, highly recommend that you get on the email list for the publicbankinginstitute.org. They just put out a new video on YouTube that shows you how public banking works. Shows you how banking in general works. So then it shows you how public banking can, again, return the interest back to the people and pay for public costs. Jupiter and Uranus, they had the 3 conjunctions back in Aries Pisces in 2010-11, right when Uranus was starting its brand new 84-year cycle. Remember that? Remember how excited we were for Uranus and Aries? Together, it's the conscious evolution of the individualization process. And so seed thoughts that were laid between them in their 14-year cycle. Pisces, the interconnectedness of us all. Aries, the freedom to believe or do whatever we want. And that interaction between all and me. Together, they bring an expanding awareness of collective social groups and social rights. And Uranus helps expand the belief systems of the world we want to live in, and specifically making use of technology. Now, through Sag, Jupiter will make waning sesquisquadrates to Uranus. That's a waning square and a half. That's moving from full phase to disseminating phase. And full phase is where we really have to start to take the other into consideration as compared to us. And disseminating phase is when the other becomes society itself. What's the largest group that we can look at on collective levels? And so here we're having to take larger and larger groups and social issues into consideration. So Jupiter and Sag can be motivating us to become active in society on inclusive issues, on exclusive issues. It's not limited. Populism is not limited to the left. Populism can be left or right. It will continue that truth versus lies debate and what is real. Uranus in Taurus, two of these aspects, if you notice, take place with Uranus in Aries. We're not done with those Uranus in Aries initiation, exposing things. Oh, excuse me, one of the two. I was looking at the quincunx. Jupiter makes one waning in conjunct to Uranus here in a couple of days. And then the three waning sesquisquadrates. What is social activism in the digital age? Not only are there the distortions of fake news depending upon your source of it, as the example I gave with my young blood earlier, but there is so much that can also be done on a positive, progressive, or inclusive level with social activism in the digital age. We may hear things coming in the news, Jupiter, Uranus, and how social media is really becoming a driving force, the medium through which social activism takes place. You know, just to give you a Jupiter and Scorpio example, when you look at the, was it Parkland, Florida shootings that took place in Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2018. Jupiter and Scorpio, my love didn't, you know, rejected me, according to the kid who brought the gun to school. But those kids took to social media and in 1 month organized hundreds of thousands of people marching on, what do they call the mall in Washington, D.C., the outdoor mall? Oh, which, by the way, the Donald Trump administration is trying to get any protest groups to pay for their own security when they organize a protest in Washington, D.C. Stay tuned on that one, Jupiter and Sag, an illegal issue to look at. And of course, we're not, again, we are not guaranteed which way the power and motivation of groups are going to go, progressive or regressive. Stay tuned. It's going to be up to the masses to write that story and see where it actually turns out. Here's another one for you. Jupiter, Neptune, 13-year cycle. Jupiter's in its own sign, Sagittarius. Neptune's in its own sign, Pisces. We're going to have 3 planets transiting through their own signs next year. Jupiter, Sag, Saturn, Cap, Neptune in Pisces. So all 3 of these planets have strong transits going on, and they're starting new cycles again. Now with Jupiter, Neptune, it's the interplay of conscious and unconscious beliefs. Jupiter is our conscious beliefs. Neptune is our unconscious beliefs on the deepest levels possible. So here it's going to be getting in touch with universal truth versus believing what makes us feel comfortable, or choosing to believe what supports our own political, social, religious, etc. agendas. Now, there can be strong messages to evolve with these 2 planets, but we don't always act upon them. Here are the conjunctions with Jupiter, Neptune. And again, just as a generic sign that I have put in here on the Jupiter webinars, evolution of our beliefs on the broadest levels with personal implementation, Jupiter. Last conjunction of those 2 in 09, Aquarius, quantum physics. Here's what I wanted to show you. What can motivate us is next year, Jupiter is going to have 3 last quarter squares to Neptune, the crises in consciousness. And between the two planets ruling spirituality, we're going to have spiritual crises in consciousness on multiple levels. What we have to be careful of is falling into victimization consciousness with Neptune and Sag, or just, falling into defeatism and we can't do it. There is such potential here to have so much debate around truth versus lies exposed on any level. It's going to be up to us. So I would say to those who listen to these webinars, it is to just turn around the day after tomorrow in the United States and continue to speak, to continue to converse, to continue to educate, to continue to work in the arena of changing what you want to see happen on planet Earth. There could be various Jupiter and Sag legal issues, lawsuits that will trigger debates on what our collective beliefs are. And these Jupiter-Neptune squares could create impetus to change laws. These squares, will they allow those Catholic priests to marry? Stay tuned. So Leroy and I'll talk about this throughout the year on our weekly podcast. These will be some pretty big aspects for Jupiter. Just because these two rulers are naturally square, they rule the mutable quadrant, and they rule the search for truth and beliefs on the broadest levels possible. Jupiter-Pluto, 12-year cycle, 1 conjunction in 07 late Sag. Jupiter will have those 3 conjunctions in 2020 in the last third of Capricorn. Together, this is the evolution of our soul individually and collectively. Their initial conjunction in 07 in late Sag has instigated the expansion of our individual and collective beliefs on some of the broadest levels. However, we've also seen extremes of distortions in regards to so many on the religious right, compromising on principles and values in order to get a political agenda. Well, stay tuned. Jupiter is going to have 3 waning semi-sextiles to Pluto as well. So here's prior efforts coming to fruition, both good and bad. Unsustainable realities exposed to the light of day that Pluto and Capricorn haves versus have-nots. Can the rule of law overcome plutocracy? Will we see the religious right get to have control of the law in the United States with a conservative Supreme Court? The Supreme Court cannot call itself neutral anymore with the last hearing. I don't remember what his first name was, Brett Kavanaugh. Those hearings and how he behaved, he totally exposed himself, Jupiter, on where he stood on political issues. Power struggles intensify through bravado and extremes, the Jupiter and Sag. Again, with Saturn balsamic Pluto, some of these mega mergers that are going on with international corporations, and they're going to do everything they can to maintain the power. Stay tuned. We'll see where all of that goes when the 3 planets get into Capricorn, and then when Jupiter, Saturn starts moving into Sag. But as we look at Jupiter waning Pluto, the powers that be are going to try to get away with as much lie as they can to have as much power as they can. Doesn't mean there can't be any economic upsets. That's quite possible, especially if the public starts demanding more equitable sharing in regards to resources. Stay tuned. I think, again, we'll see more things that are just not sustainable crumbling. But with Jupiter and Pluto, there's going to be this pretending that this is going to be okay. I can get by with this. I'm going to get as much as I can for as long as I can. Now, I have some slides that I am just going to go through a little quickly here. I'm just going to expose them on the screen. You will have the PDFs the PDF that will show up, in which you will be able to look at your generation here and be able to see some of the notes that I am going to put on the screen. But in regards to the sake of time, I am just going to be somewhat brief with these. As you watch this webinar, you can always hit pause so you can read it, make some notes, look at it however you want to. But I thought in regards to the Pluto generations, I would put some of this information on the screen for you. And I'm just hitting the major ones. I'm not going with the young generation. Sorry, Pluto Cancer. If you watch this, I did not get you on. I want to briefly just show you Donald Trump's chart. This is a version of what I showed in Cancer Capricorn. Next month, Donald Trump is going to have his progressed node conjunct his natal Uranus. What upsets and surprises will be in his world? Transiting Jupiter will be on his south node in Moon. It will oppose his Uranus and Sun. How long is he going to be remaining in charge? Until enough people rise up and demand truth, ethics, and the rule of law. Here is the actual dates in which transiting Jupiter accentuates the Gemini Sag axis in Donald Trump's chart. Don't mean to neglect his Pluto Leo and the Leo rising, but so much of talking out of both sides of his mouth, speaking the truth, turn around saying a lie, exaggerating, expanding the lie, that's all gonna come home to roost next year through Jupiter in Sagittarius. And it's just like the heat's gonna be on, the pressure's gonna be on. Stay tuned. We'll see which one of these three passages of Jupiter, direct, retrograde, or direct the second time, brings everything in the news. This is a list of all of the lawsuits currently going on for Donald Trump. The Russian conspiracy investigation by Mueller, the obstruction of justice by Mueller, all the fallout from Michael Cohen in regards to tax evasion, fraud, campaign violations, non-disclosure lawsuit by Stormy Daniels, the defamation lawsuit by Summer Zervos, First Amendment violations over his threats to corporations, the emoluments clause brought by Maryland and Washington, D.C. and Democrats. This is basically about the Trump hotel in Washington, D.C. that he finished just before getting elected, and how many foreign diplomats stay there. Is this, in violation of the emoluments clause, which says you can't receive gifts from foreign agents or foreign countries while you're president? They have to become a public item. You know, somebody gives the president a cultural outfit that they wear. It goes to the Smithsonian. It's not a private thing. The self-dealing and mismanagement of the Trump Foundation. Remember how Trump railed against the Clinton Foundation? Well, stay tuned. We're going to have all the exposures in regards to the Trump Foundation, all the state tax law violations by the Trump Foundation, racketeering lawsuit in which investors were duped and exchanged. I don't even know what that one is. I just researched this out of Forbes magazine. I hadn't even read that one. But these are the lawsuits that are currently in process. Now the big question is, can lawsuits be brought against a sitting president of the United States? In other words, while he's in office. That hasn't been decided. Stay tuned. The Justice Department has a legal paper saying they don't think so, but it's never been tried in the courts, so to speak. In regards to Nixon, he resigned. In regards to other presidents, I don't remember the details, but it's undecided of whether or not a sitting president can have lawsuits brought against him while he's in office. He can be impeached. We don't know. I think these lawsuits will carry on for years. And if a conservative Supreme Court in the United States says these lawsuits can't be brought while Donald Trump is in office, guess what happens when he leaves office? The United States is going to have Jupiter in Sag, aspect 5 planets and the nodal axis. And I use the Gemini rising chart for July 4th at 2:13 a.m. in Philadelphia. Jupiter is going to go over that 7th house. It's going to oppose Mars 3 times. It's going to square Neptune, waxing square Neptune 3 times. Which side do you choose? And so here again, we can just see legal issues and lawsuits in general. When the Republicans are in power, the Democratic attorneys general of the states bring the lawsuits. When the Democrats are in power, the Republican attorneys general of the states bring the lawsuits. This goes back and forth and back and forth. And the other thing that is pretty closely watched in the United States midterm elections this week is how many states attorneys general offices will the Democrats take in this cycle. Stay tuned. It's a detail you'll want to watch, because this is when the president does when he just signs his name on a piece of paper and says, I'm going to do this, executive orders. The AGs, file lawsuits on it. Trump wanted to stop immigrants coming from Muslim countries a week after he went into office, and it was in violation of the Constitution and freedom of religion. The courts will be busy next year. Here are the exact dates of Jupiter aspects. Jupiter only has one opposition to Uranus, but here are the 5 that I spoke about. And so you have the dates if you want to look at them and get specific. Okay, what I'm going to do next now is, this is Jupiter and Sag through the 12 houses. You can, again, pause these on the webinar as you are watching it to see a specific house. And of course, you will have the PDF to print out however you want to. This is going to be the last of the slides. So what I'm going to say, if there's any areas with Jupiter and Sag that I've not brought up for discussion, you're welcome to raise them. You're welcome to ask any questions that you may have on any subject. Comments or questions from Leroy as you have participated in the last couple hours?
Yeah, your audio came through quite nicely, actually. And just a reminder that this now is not a two-part series. This is the only Jupiter and Sagittarius PDF that will be distributed, and as a make good, you will be included in the 2019 forecast automatically. Anybody that enrolled and/or registered for this webinar series will be automatically enrolled in the 2019 forecast webinar that we're going to create sometime here at the end of the year, December, I assume.
If you want to, if you want to write it down, that forecast will be January 2nd. So, and that will be Wednesday, January 2nd. You can go ahead and write it down right now. And of course, the link to participate live will be sent to you from the webinar company. You're not going to have to do anything other than look for that email, correct, Leroy?
Or from Media Monk at evolutionaryastrology.net, okay? So one way or the other, we're going to get that to you as a make good. Yeah. And thank you for understanding, and I'm glad we got that on the recording again. But no, we're just getting lots of good positive comments about a lot of information one more time in a short period of 2 hours here with Jupiter and Sag. So thank you for the research, Star Lady.
Yes, lots of information, isn't it? I'm going to end with a slide that I used last year that I absolutely love. And I do that because Black Elk was a Oglala Sioux medicine man, as we call them, from up here in western South Dakota. And I don't know if you are aware of this, but within the Leroy and I live in western South Dakota, Rapid City, of course, Mount Rushmore, where we carved the 4 men into the mountain, 4 presidents. But in our national forest, we have what's called Black Elk Wilderness. It is just an area of the forest. When a forest is designated a wilderness, you can't come in with mechanized vehicles. They don't log it. It is left in its natural state. And if you're not aware of this, the highest mountain east of the Rockies to the Atlantic used to be called Harney Peak. Harney was a colonel with Custer and fought the Indians, and the Indians petitioned to have it renamed to Black Elk Peak, and they renamed it. So we really appreciate that. The first piece, which is the most important, is that which comes within the souls of people when they realize their relationship, their oneness with the universe and all its powers. And when they realize that at the center of the universe dwells Wankan Tonka, the Great Spirit, and that this center is really everywhere. It is within each of us. This is the real peace, and the others are but reflections of this. The second piece is that which is made between 2 individuals. The third is that which is made between 2 nations. But above all, you should understand that there can never be peace between nations until there is known that true peace, which, as I have often said, is within the souls of men. May Jupiter and Sag be good to you. May it reveal your highest, broadest levels of truth. And all you have to do is say, show me the truth, show me the truth, show me the truth. Now, we did our nodal axis in Cancer Capricorn a week ago, Monday. That is fresh. There is a ton of information in that webinar. I highly recommend you get that webinar if you haven't. There's not just information for the nodal axis over the next 18 months. There's also some slides in there about Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto going into Capricorn in 2020. And then, of course, a week from tonight, November 12th, is the free Mercury retrograde. And there again on your screen, you can see you're already enrolled in the 2019 forecast. All right, everyone, thank you very much for hanging in there over the course of this 2-hour and a little over webinar. And I will talk to you again. Adios.